Yes.
Wait.
If Laszlo's presence in a cafe can inspire this unfortunate demonstration, what more will his presence in Casablanca bring on? I advise that this place be shut up at once.
But everybody's having such a good time.
Yes, much too good a time. The place is to be closed.
But I've no excuse to close it.
Find one.
Everybody is to leave here immediately. This cafe is closed until further notice. Clear the room at once.
Close me up. On what ground?
I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on in here.
You're winning, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. Everybody out at once.
Shocked. That is from the 1942 classic movie Casablanca. How many of you have seen this movie? Really? Go home today and watch it. It's one of my favorite movies, and I've watched it over and over again. And by the way, I apologize for the quality, but that was the best I could get on YouTube. So, this is in French Morocco, is where it's set. It's set during World War II, and the Nazis are occupying French Morocco. As you know from other venues, that the Nazis were cruel and they were oppressive, and it was hard to be underneath them. They regularly would put people in prison, and they would oppress people, and they would kill people. And this is what folks were dealing with. And of course, there is a special animosity between the French and the Germans. And of course, everybody's resentful of what's going on. But at the same time, the people with the guns and the people with the power have this power over them, so that they really couldn't say much about it or do much about it. And so they kept their heads down and they just endured. Well, that's the setup for this clip, because now they're in Rick's nightclub, and the Germans start singing this patriotic song, which, by the way, is about, the song is about keeping the French away from the Rhine River, which is the river that separates Germany and France, and that's always been a dispute. And of course, now here they are. They're not even at the Rhine. They're in French Morocco. And so the Germans start singing this, and it's in your face. And then Victor Laszlo gets up. He's a famous resistance fighter, and he strikes up the band, and they start singing the French national anthem. At first, he sings alone. And then you see what happens. It's like a wildfire. And pretty soon, the Nazis are drowned out, right? It's my favorite scene in the movie because, you see, it's not a singing contest. That song is an act of defiance. The weak and the powerless rising up in song against the people with the guns and the people who fill the concentration camps. It's resistance. And it comes through singing. And it's powerful. I mean, what happens when everyone resists together in song is that they're bound together as one. I mean, when we sing in this congregation, you're not single voices. You are one thing. There's a solidarity to it. And then what also happens is it lifts your spirit and your soul, right? And then what also happens is it plants deep within your breast the seeds of courage to rise up against things that out there you'd be afraid of. And of course, one more thing happens. In terms of those who have the guns and fill the concentration camps, it instills in them a sense of paranoia and fear. This is not the only place it happens. We were talking last week about Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement. Do you remember seeing all the videos, the video clips of row upon row upon row of people, defenseless people? And they have no guns, they have no dogs, they have no water cannons, no tear gas, and they will not raise up a single hand against their oppressors. Row upon row of people locking arms and singing. We will overcome someday. Right? It happened again in 1989. The Berlin Wall fell. But maybe you didn't know this. It's kind of buried in history. But in the months leading up to that, every Monday night in Leipzig, people would get together outside the church, and they would light candles, and they would sing. And they would sing about hope, and they would sing about justice, and they would sing about resistance. And it started with a few thousand people, and over the course of those couple of months, it grew to 300,000. And they sang. And that singing shook the foundations of a totalitarian government. So much so that it contributed to the fall of the Berlin Wall. I read someplace that when all of this happened, someone asked one of the captains of the East German Secret Service, why didn't you put this rebellion down like you did so many others in the past? And it is reported that this captain replied, because we had no contingency plan for song. So I have an idea. Let's sing. They have no contingency plan for song. I was reading David Lose, and by the way, some of this sermon comes from a sermon that he preached. Want to make sure that I'm clear about that. And he was talking about the fact that, and I guess I knew this, but it didn't really occur to me, that in the first couple of chapters of the book of Luke, the story that Luke tells about Jesus, song is breaking out everywhere. Okay? So last week we were talking about Zechariah, and that would be John the Baptist's father. And when John the Baptist is born and Zechariah gets his voice back, what does he do? He sings. He sings because his son has been born, and this son is going to be a prophet, and this prophet is going to usher in a king who will break like the morning light into a dark world. And then a story that's maybe a little more familiar to you, when Jesus was born, a multitude of the heavenly host get together and they break out in verse. Glory to God in the highest, and peace among us. Right? And then when Jesus is 8 days old, he is presented at the temple. And there is an old man there his name is Simeon. And he is looking for the consolation of Israel. And he's been waiting. And he sees this child. I don't know how he knows it, but he gathers the child up and he sings a farewell song. Lord, let your servant go in peace now. Your word has been fulfilled. And he's looking down at this baby. I see the salvation now with my own eyes that you have prepared for us, a light to the nations and the glory of your people, Israel. It's called the Nunc Dimittis. That's what we call it now. Let your servant go in peace. And now let's back up to the very first song. You just heard the lesson being read, and it's the story of Gabriel announcing the birth of Jesus to Mary. And when that happens, then Mary travels to go be with her relative Elizabeth, who's carrying John the Baptist. And when Elizabeth greets her, Mary breaks into song. And let's, could you please put that up? This is part of the song. If you can all see it, read it with me. Oh, how my soul praises the Lord, for he took notice of his lowly servant girl, and he has scattered the proud and the haughty ones. He has brought down princes from their thrones and exalted the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away with empty hands. He has helped his servant Israel and remembered to be merciful, for he has made this promise to our ancestors, to Abraham and his children forever. That's snippets of a longer song that Mary sings out loud. And now let me be clear about something. Zechariah, if you remember from last week, he's a priest. He's one of 12,000 priests. He's a drop in the bucket. Nobody would notice him. The angels, that sounds pretty impressive, but who do they go to? Shepherds. Which, by the way, I don't know if you know this or not, but in that day and time, it was decreed by law that the testimony of women and shepherds was not admissible in a court of law. Did you know that? Brings the news to the shepherds. Simeon, an old man who was about to die, and Mary and Elizabeth, who have been called by God to carry children. Elizabeth is too old. Mary's so young she's not yet married. And it looks impossible. I mean, nobody knows these people. They're not princes. They're far away from the halls of power. They're women. They have no status. It looks like an uphill climb. And in the face of all of that, Zechariah and the shepherds and Simeon and Mary and Elizabeth, they do not shrink from their circumstances. And they are not beset with hopelessness in a hopeless situation. No. What they do is the most powerful act that they have at their disposal. They sing. And as you saw, they sing of freedom. They sing of reversals. They sing of impossible things. It is an act of resistance against the powers that be in this world. It is an act of defiance against all the ways that the world would put them down. And it binds them together as one. And it raises their hearts and their souls. And it plants in them the seeds of courage to say things and do things that otherwise they couldn't. It's a powerful act, that act of song. And it changes them. And they in turn change the world. And what's more is, all those powers that be and all the evil forces of darkness and the agents of the evil one, they have no contingency plan for the power of song. I have an idea. Let's sing. Okay, I don't know if I can say this in church, but one of my professors, my preaching professor, Sheldon Tossengard, said, when you preach, get your buns into it. Okay? And I would like you to do the same with your song. Okay? I mean, raise it up. Raise up your voices as loud as you can. Because as you do, your body and your heart and your soul will follow along. That's what song does. And of course, we see it everywhere, right? We see it in resistance movements. We see it in other places as well. We see it in counseling sessions. When people come in and for one reason or another are beaten down by the world. We see it in hospital beds and at the side of those who are breathing their last. And we see it here on Sunday morning when we gather together. And yes, we preach the word, and that word is important. But frankly, just as important, and in some ways more important, we sing. And that song changes us. That song grants us courage, plants those seeds in us. That song brings us together because we all bring all of those things in life that trouble us and that weigh us down. We bring them here in this place. And we all sit together and we know that the people sitting next to us and the people that are sitting in the back and the people that are sitting in the front are all doing the same thing. They're bringing their stuff. They're bringing hopelessness. They're bringing impossibilities. They're bringing darkness. All the things that the world out there has told them is reality. We bring it here. And we hear the word, but just as importantly, and in some ways more importantly, we sing. And it binds us together as one, and it raises our hearts, and it plants in us seeds of courage as we go back out there and face what the world is going to tell us. My friends, song is resistance. It is defiance. It is resistance against the opinion that what you see out there is what you get. And that's a lie. So we sing with Mary and Elizabeth. We sing with Zechariah. We sing with the angels. We sing with Simeon. And we sing together as one. And whatever it is that's holding you down, Let that song wash over you. Fill this room with your voice. And as you do, your hearts will be changed. What we're talking about over the course of this next year is a focus on Jesus. And we're talking about his transformative power. Jesus comes not to bless the status quo and not to keep things the same, but he comes to make all things new. The song that we sing makes us new, so that when we go out there, we can share that newness with a world of darkness. So sing, my friends. Sing.